Johnny Boy Child's coming, he gonna be a Rolling Stone. Sure enough, he's a Rolling Stone.
Now, one of those baby boomers who was profoundly influenced by Rolling Stone was our very own editor-at-large, Craig Copetas, and he joins me now from Paris. Craig, welcome back. Now, you worked as a writer there at Rolling Stone in the 1970s. What was the place like back then?
Oh, it was a wonderful, wonderful place. Lots of ideas colliding in one space, lots of arguments, deadlines missed. It was very creative. It was a real creative brew at the time. You'd never get away with that kind of management today, but and that's precisely why Rolling Stone is now on the block.
Yeah, and speaking of which, Craig, I think we have a picture of you from that era of you.
Yeah.
The famous David Bowie, I think. Oh, there we are. Tell us a little bit about that photo.
Gosh. Well, I worked. I was an editor and writer out of the London bureau for a couple of years, and I did a story on. I used to write about Bowie, used to write about Burroughs, used to write about all the rock stars back then as a young reporter, until I could climb out of music and, you know, come here and be with you as our covering business and politics. My first love.
Rolling Stone sounds a lot of fun, though.
Well, you know, but listen, you know, it changed. I mean, you know, there's a lot of cultural reasons why you can say why they had to do this, but I think the one that hits home the most, if you look at, say, the Drudge Report or any kind of social media news operation today, you're looking at hits in the neighborhood of hundreds of millions of people seeing this kind of stuff. Do you know, at its height, the biggest selling issue of Rolling Stone was the issue in, I think it was 1980, after John Lennon was assassinated in New York, which sold 1.45 million copies. The most successful magazine, Rolling Stone, prior to that was the issue, and I think it was probably 77, when Elvis Presley died. That sold only about 1 million copies. So it was just the numbers could no longer sustain Rolling Stone. It got consumed by social media, no circulation, and they weren't able to sell ads.
But I wonder whether those numbers belie the disproportionate influence that it had amongst its readers, though. But let's talk a little bit about it from a business point of view. Jan Wenner, who began the magazine and continues to run it to this day. What did he do wrong? Where did he go wrong, do you think?
Well, Jan was one of the classic 60s publishers. Jan wanted to pattern himself after Henry Luce, the founder of Time magazine and the Time Empire. And Jan never believed that the internet and digital media would take off in the way it did. There were quite a few publishers who felt this. Tony Elliott at Time Out in London said the same thing. In the late 90s, he said digital media was nothing. It was never going to amount to anything. And then Jan had another problem, and that was in about 1983 when MTV came out, because he thought that MTV was never going to work. But that did a flip on him, and that in the late 80s, Rolling Stone actually made somewhat of a comeback. But then again, the ads started to dry up. People weren't willing to spend the time reading these long articles. Media became more instantaneous. Gossip became all over the TV, and eventually the internet. So the power and presence of Rolling Stone in the late 60s and in the 70s through the 80s, it just waned. And on the eve of its 50th anniversary, it would be 50 years old in a couple of weeks, in October 6th. is when we started it in San Francisco.
Lovely trip down memory lane there. Craig Copetas in Paris, thank you so much.